your streets. Make yourselves visible and heard. Say that people matter, freedom matters, peace matters, Ukraine matters.
And in the 4 weeks that have followed the invasion, the scale of the devastation in Ukraine is nothing short of horrific. Here's Susan Ormiston.
It was 4 a.m. local time on February 24th that Russia invaded. Billions of dollars in destruction, at least 1,300 Ukrainian troops killed, thousands of civilians, according to local estimates, over 100 children. And on the Russian side, NATO says that between 7,000 and 15,000 Russian troops have died. It's a wide range because of quite unreliable reporting in Moscow. And this morning, Ukraine's Navy said it sunk the Russian ship Orsk in the Sea of Azov near the port city of Berdyansk. The Russians had been disembarking armored vehicles from there for that raging battle in the south around Mariupol. And people fleeing that besieged city are being told that if they can get out of Mariupol, they can get to Berdyansk and get transferred out. 7 more humanitarian corridors were opened again this morning in Ukraine. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Lviv.
In other news, Chinese state television is reporting today that search and rescue crews have found part of the engine from this week's passenger plane crash. The Boeing 737 crashed 3 days ago. It was reportedly cruising at its normal height when it nosedived into a mountainside. At this point, no survivors have been found. North Korea carried out an intercontinental ballistic missile test overnight. South Korea and Japan both say it's a threat to peace, while the White House is calling it a violation of international law. The missile is being described as the largest North Korea has ever launched. Elise Skura has more now from Tokyo.
The missile was reportedly in the air for over an hour, traveling a distance of nearly 1,000 kilometers before falling into the sea near northern Japan. Seoul responded with its own test of emergency ground, sea, and air response. This would be the first full-scale launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile in 5 years and puts U.S. territory within range. The North had put those tests on hold during denuclearization talks with the U.S., but there has been no progress since President Joe Biden took office. Since January, Pyongyang has ramped up firings to a record pace. Its most recent was a failed test that came just days after South Korea elected its next president, who has promised to toughen up on its nuclear-armed neighbor to the north. Elise Skura, CBC News, Tokyo.
Formal free trade talks between Canada and Britain are getting underway today. The two countries already have an interim agreement to maintain the relationship that was in place prior to Brexit. Now work is underway to establish a permanent deal. Digital and e-commerce issues are a major factor because almost half of all British exports to Canada are services and not goods. The Canadian men's soccer team can qualify tonight for this year's World Cup. They are playing Costa Rica in Costa Rica, and a win will send them to their first World Cup in 36 years. The last time they appeared, 1986, in Mexico City. The 2022 World Cup is set for Qatar in November. And that is the world this hour. You can listen to us live on your mobile device using the CBC Listen app or anytime on voice-activated devices like Amazon Echo or Google Home. For CBC News, I'm Joe Perkins.
In the weather today, a mix of sun and cloud near James Bay, but mainly cloudy elsewhere. Most of the region will see a chance of flurries or snow, but expect periods of snow changing to periods of rain for the southern and eastern half of the region. We could see 5 centimeters in Kirkland Lake. Temperatures from +1 to +5. Tonight, cloudy with a chance of flurries around Timmins and periods of rain or snow near the Quebec border, as well as the south of the listening area. Fog patches should develop in the far north. Temperatures tonight from -10 to +2. Tomorrow, clouds over most of the northeast. Temperatures from 0 to 7 degrees.
Good morning, I'm Matt Galloway, and you're listening to The Current. Still to come, the city of Mariupol has been reduced to rubble by shelling. In 30 minutes, why the Russians are so desperate to gain control and why Ukrainians are fighting back. But first, convincing Canadians to slow down. Speed is killing Canadians across this country. In 2020, there were more than 1,700 motor vehicle fatalities. That includes drivers, passengers, pedestrians, and cyclists. Yesterday, Ontario Provincial Police announced the road fatalities last year in that province were the highest in a decade. 315 people died on the road in Ontario. Speed was a factor in 81 of those deaths. Road safety is a problem as old as the road itself, and getting politicians to do something about it can be an uphill battle. Jess Speaker is trying to fix that. She's a victim of road violence who is now a road safety advocate and spokesperson for Friends and Family for Safe Streets. She's in Toronto. Jess, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for being here. Are you surprised? I mean, anecdotally, I think we all have stories and have seen things, but are you surprised with the latest numbers that show an increase in deaths in Ontario roads, the highest in a decade in that province?
Sadly not. It's a trend that's mirrored around the world, and in particular in the United States. There's been a significant rash of preventable deaths on our roads since the pandemic those measures have been lifting.
This is something that is personal to you because of what happened to you in 2015. Do you mind just briefly telling that story?
For sure. In 2015, I was riding my bike to work on Bathurst Street here in Toronto, a little bit north of Eglinton, and an SUV driver made a left turn without looking, and she slammed her SUV into my left side, and when she did that, she broke my spine. She gave me a brain injury, and she inflicted very extensive damage to my soft tissue, so I developed an enormous blood clot in my left leg, and a piece of that clot broke off later. It chewed through my heart, and it landed across both lobes of my lungs. It's called a massive bilateral pulmonary embolism. So I nearly died twice, not only because of one reckless driver, but because of the way that our streets and vehicles are designed. What happened to me and what happens on our streets is not an accident, it's a result, and we can change the system and we can change the result.
Process being
Well, I'm still suffering from clinically severe depression, anxiety, daily chronic pain. My activities are limited. I'm not the person that I used to be. I was 31 when this happened to me, kind of starting out in a new career. I'm still working in the same job, but in a limited way, and my life has been on hold, essentially, since it happened. I haven't had any kids yet. I haven't started a family. It's been really hard. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Was the driver that hit you, was that driver ever charged?
She was charged with a charge called turn on in safety, which is a minor infraction of the Highway Traffic Act. However, she successfully pled down to a lesser charge called improper use of a turn signal. So in the end, she was convicted of something that carries no demerit points, and she was fined $300.
$300.
That's right.
Before you were hit, how much thought had you given to the way that streets are designed?
Funnily enough, not very much. I just rode my bike everywhere and I had fun doing it. There were, of course, close calls that would make me angry, but I didn't, before this happened, I didn't put in the time to research why our roads are the way they are and why vehicles are designed the way that they are. What are the forces that have shaped the system into this result? And it took somebody slamming an SUV into me to do that, and that's why I'm trying to speak up. Nobody else should have to go through what I did and what so many other families have when they've lost a loved one on our roads. I want to spread this information because things need to change.
And when you talk about close calls, I mean, many of us have had close calls, and perhaps we'll put the bike away for a while, or we will be much more aware of where we are when we are out on those roads. Has that changed your experience? Has that changed how you feel traveling on the streets of your city?
Absolutely. I no longer feel any sense of safety or any sense of belonging. If I ever ride my bike, I will only do it in dedicated infrastructure and only on days when I have the courage to fight for my life. And that is not every day. That is not most days, actually. So most days, I feel robbed of my choices and robbed of my preferred mobility, and I end up driving my car. And every time I drive my car, instead of taking my bike, it makes the city worse. It wears out our roads faster. I contribute to pollution. I contribute to my own sedentary lifestyle, healthcare costs, childhood asthma, contributing to climate disaster. I just want to ride a bike, and I do not feel safe doing it most of the time.
What are the things that you think could be done, the easy wins, to make streets in Canadian towns and cities safer?
It's so easy to do, and I'm so glad you asked. It's all about building complete streets and Vision Zero design changes.
What do those things? What do those things mean? Complete streets
Yeah,
and Vision
great.
Zero.
I say these words all the time, and they're very vague. It means things like dedicated protected cycle tracks on the sides of roads with a robust barrier, like we have on Adelaide and Richmond. Those stop not only drivers from plowing into cyclists, but also from people walking on the sidewalk. We need narrower car lanes everywhere, because when car lanes are wide and straight, as they are everywhere, and especially on our arterial roads, that encourages drivers to speed at speeds that will kill somebody if they happen to hit somebody. Narrower lanes make it feel less safe for drivers to speed, and they sort of automatically, without thinking about it, slow down to speeds that are survivable. We need protected intersection designs. If we have streets that intersect, which each have protected bike lane, then we can put in protected corner islands. Those islands force drivers to make sharp turns so that they make turns carefully and attentively and are less likely to hit somebody while they turn. We need raised crosswalks. So when you're crossing the street, there's usually a gentle slope down to the level of the roadway. You walk across the same level as the cars, and then you walk up a gentle slope at the other side. Instead, raised crosswalks flip that, and it remains elevated. So it functions as a speed hump for drivers, and it reminds drivers that that's pedestrian territory. There's a guest in the crosswalk, and they must drive slowly and carefully. We need wider spread, what's called leading pedestrian interval, but that's where the pedestrian signal activates before the green light for drivers. That allows pedestrians to reach more the middle of the intersection before drivers are allowed to move, and that makes them more visible to drivers. That makes a massive reduction in collisions at intersections.
These are sort of systemic changes, and I want to ask you about why those systemic changes are important. But one of them that you haven't mentioned is just around speeding. There used to be a day when they're called speed traps. There would be perhaps police officers who would be there with a little radar gun, and if you were going over the speed limit, you got a ticket. There have now been an increase in automated speed enforcement